Okay, now that we are on this step, I believe step 7 of the modeling process, what we need to do is start shaping the model to be a little more conducive to sort of a standard human head. We created the geometry necessary to create a good edge flow and deformation around the eyes and the mouth in the last video, but now we need to clean it up a little bit. And I'm going to use the front view for this. You might want to note, if you are in Channel Box Layer Editor, we've created a lot of history, and periodically we're going to want to delete that history. If you're in Channel Box Layer Editor, you can go to Edit and delete history here. You can go over here and click this button. You can go to Edit and delete by type, or you can hit Alt-Shift-D, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Alt-Shift-D. There it is, and all that history is out of there. So let's go ahead and look at the head. We're going to bring this in again to sort of more of a standard edge flow. If we look at this in Smooth Preview, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, or focus rather, on the front view, and then I'm going to go to Vertex. And I already have soft selection on, but just in case you didn't retain it from the last couple times we covered it, B turns soft selection on or off. And we're definitely going to be using that a lot going forward. Soft selection just allows us, again, if I hold B down, I can select a region by sliding my mouse to the right or the left, increasing or decreasing the size of influence over the different vertices. The more influence I have, the more vertices that are going to move around or scale or rotate. So that moves all those vertices, as opposed to something a little tighter like this, which is what I'm going to go with to sort of start reshaping the eye. Now, you never want to be working in one view with a three-dimensional object for too long, or you're going to start to do things that are a little bit more unintentional with the shape. So I'm always going to kind of be mindful of like what's going on over in these areas. The one thing about the eyes here in the model is that they're sort of wrapped around the front of the head, and that's not really how the head is going to be shaped. So we're going to actually take the faces on the eye, or around the eye shape, and rotate them and move them a little bit more into a standard position. And I'm going to do that here from perspective, actually. So I'll go here, and then I'm going to hold down caps lock, or sorry, tab, and go around the eye this way, and then that lets me sort of paint my selection there. So I have this eye region there, and what I'm going to do something a little bit extreme. I'm actually going to scale these to be flat, which is very odd looking. I'm going to scale them inward like this, still pretty odd looking, and then I'm going to center them back up, and I'm going to move them back over here. Now, this isn't what we're going to wind up with, but I do want to create some structure around the eye that's a little bit more like the way the human skull is shaped, which would be, of course, you know, you've got sort of some concave region in here where the eyes are going to sit. You know, these are the kinds of moves you can make, and depending on which move you make, then that creates other moves that you're going to have to make down the road. But I'm going to go ahead and leave this up here. I'm going to go back to Vertex, and I'm going to start moving some things around, again with soft selection on, and create some edge flow that makes sense, hopefully makes sense as we go forward here. So again, moving, just trying to be mindful of like, what am I moving, why am I moving it. These eyelids are closed, at least in the way that we have them set up right now. In this case, I actually want to turn soft selection off because it was selecting too many vertices. And you know, sometimes when you want to straighten things out, the quick thing to do is just scale them down an axis, like I just did right here. I'm going to scale down the y-axis, or maybe in the case of the eyelid here, I'm just going to scale it on the z-axis, make it flat. There's lots of different ways to approach this. I might take these guys right here and scale them along the x to straighten them out, just to sort of get back to sort of a baseline. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever's called for in the model. And eventually, of course, I'm going to start making this a little more rounded to the shape of the eye underneath the eyelid as needed, right? So it just depends on what the needs of the model are, right? Eventually, all of this is going to be round because, again, it's surrounding the eye. But there's that. So you can kind of see that we're getting to a little closer to where we might want to be with this, but there are going to be some distinct considerations when we finally get a reference model in the mix here, and we're actually working from a reference instead of just sort of guessing at where things are going to wind up, which is essentially what we're doing. But as we get closer to that desired outcome, it's going to require us again to put things in place. So I'm going to do the same treatment with the mouth, sort of think about, okay, what's the shape of the mouth that we want, heading into that. We've got sort of the corners of the mouth here underneath the nose. What is that edge flow going to look like ultimately? What is that contouring of the face going to look like? Really kind of pinch it in here and keep going and continue to work these nice edge loops that we created. We spent all that time creating them. Let's take advantage of it now and try to form the initial geometry that we're going to need. Okay, you can kind of see that this edge loop in particular just sort of goes, it's zigzaggy. That's not always a bad thing, but we do want to try to create some continuity between the polygons or the poly loops, right? So if I shift right click here, I can multi-cut, but I'm not actually going to cut anything. I'm just going to look at sort of how the edge flow is flowing here. Another way to do that would just be to right click and go to face and then click and then shift double click, and that will show you your different poly loops as they sort of exist. And you can see this one's sort of like all over the place over here. So I'm actually going to come in here and clean up some of the edge flow leading up and down the eye and towards some of that desired geometry as we move through it. So that's what that's looking like. Again, the chin is sort of a whole thing unto itself. We definitely aren't going to wind up with something like this, so we're going to refine that a little bit by moving some vertices in and around. This is definitely a case of where do I want this to look, or what do I want it to look like on the side versus the front. I'm going to back this up a little bit over here, kind of see what I'm actually working with, which would be this geometry that's way back here. Move it kind of up and around as we go. And some of the stuff that's sort of hanging out way outside here, just because it was more evenly spaced, we are going to actually sort of bunch this a little bit more to create some contouring around the chin. So I'm going to take these in here, bring them all in as they go, right? So like this and like that. This video is going to be primarily just oriented around reshaping the model to a desired outcome. Keeping an eye on perspective, seeing like what are we actually coming up with? Is this acceptable? Are we way off base? The eyes are still going to need some work up here. I can tell you already, I'm probably going to want to do something along the lines of this, where we take these faces and maybe do a little bit of soft selection and move them back in just a little bit more. So that alignment doesn't look so crazy. The forehead may be just a little bit much there, and that may have something to do with this vertex. So I'm going to move that up and out. And this is a case where, nope, don't want soft selection, or if I do have it on, I don't want it influencing that much. I'm just going to turn it off and try to even up some of this edge flow up through here, again, to create that opportunity for a nicely contoured eye there. Nose, same deal. Let's just bring these in a little bit, kind of all the way around. Sometimes, especially working with a nose, I always like to have a look at perspective, because it can really kind of inform the decisions that you're making around the shape of it, while also keeping an eye on the multiple views that you have here. In this case, of course, we've got a very narrow sort of bit of the nose here that could be widened up. I'm just going to simply scale this up. I'm going to take all three of these guys and I'm going to move the nostril in a little bit so that I can work with that. And one other way I could do this would be to take the edge and these three edges and then move them in along this plane like that. So then I'm essentially moving the entire sort of structure there of the nose. I'm going to take this edge, kind of give it the same treatment, move it around, make that nostril a little more round, maybe rotate this just a bit, kind of checking as I go. I'm going to go to smooth preview. You can see I still have a lot of work to do there, primarily because of the geometry that I've provided for the nose. I'm going to go over here and notice that that edge flow doesn't look great. I'm going to create more going on here and here. Bring this out a little bit, bring this up and around a little bit, this guy out in front, Again, I see some jagged edges going here. I probably could stand to leverage that spun edge that we created down here. That's really supposed to come out a little bit further all the way around like this. Even that poly loop flow out a bit as we go. Coming up here, doing the same thing. And keeping an eye on things as we go. And as you can see, we're forming up a face. Now, we don't have any specific goal here because we don't have reference images, but we are trying to create a little bit more of a neutral structure kind of around the entire thing as we go. Another one I might do here is I want to bring the chin out, so I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to open up soft select by, again, tapping B or holding down B in this case, and then moving the structure out a bit so that we have that going on there. This will ultimately, these three bits will ultimately be the interior of the mouth. So I think what I'm going to do is actually rotate this without soft select on, and then scale it down a bit more so that it really just becomes sort of the, the precursor for the interior of the mouth and the lips. And again, I'm working in perspective just because it's where I feel comfortable, but I'm never taking my eyes off these other views, and I'm never going through this without double checking, like soft or smooth preview rather, using soft select to kind of manipulate those organic bits, keeping an eye on smoothness. You can see I've got kind of a rough bump on the head right here that I probably don't want, and that's corrected in a number of different ways. You can actually see the geometry out of place here. If I go to vertex, I can help smooth that up just by simply keeping an eye, again, edge flow, edge flow, edge flow, or poly loop flow, as it were, is going to help us make informed decisions about how to sort of control some of this stuff. There's a very sharp point there. Where does that exist? Oh, it's over here. Let's try to make this more of a rounded curve here, and then also sort of this longitudinal aspect of this right here. You can see we got a jagged edge there. We might want to smooth this out up here, and eventually we're going to get there, right? Now the head is still kind of a weird shape, but it's functional for when we finally bring in, again, those reference images. So we're always going to kind of keep that in mind. We're not quite to the point where we're going to use a reference image yet to form anything specific, because we're just working on the base geometry. But that is what I would do to go in based on, again, we're on step 7, is just clean up the geometry and get things formed before we start moving on to things like the ear.